This event, I would say, is one of the most important events of this year. The reason for this is that we're going to talk to the leaders of the future. We're going to learn how the young generation thinks. I'm part of the older generation, and if I do not keep updated, they will pass me quite soon. I found a quote that said every generation must think several steps ahead of their previous generation. That's the way to progress, and that's the way to become more and more civilized human beings. This is what the young people are doing, and that is the reason why we have to listen to them. The reason why we are here today is that a few months ago, I was talking to one of our members at the chamber. She mentioned this young guy, a student who made a school project about sustainability. He did this job as part of the education, and she asked me to watch a video. And you know, when you get videos, you're like, yeah, it's always fun to see, but you don't really have that high expectations. So you're kind of neutral when you click play. And when I started looking at this film, I was totally blown away. I was so impressed. And this is the reason why we are here today. Because we do see so many role models, young people. We know Greta Thunberg, and we see others. And first of all, I would like you all to see this film so that we can base the discussion on this. And then after that, I will invite up the three young people, Kamakshi, Zoe, and Filip, on stage. But we take that after we've seen this film. So enjoy this film, and it is three of our member companies in the chamber that are interviewed by Filip.
Hello, my name is Filip Zachrisson and I live here in Hong Kong and have been for the last 5 years. And before I came here I thought that all the city was just thousands and thousands of skyscrapers. But I couldn't have been more wrong. Hong Kong has so much more to offer. There's so much nature here and I fell in love with it right away. Growing up in Sweden I have a closeness to the outdoors that fueled a passion for sustainability, and I want to understand how to prevent climate change. I see more and more people and governments doing their best to prevent this problem. People taking recycling more seriously and understanding how the food we eat impacts the climate. Governments too, setting regulations and promoting innovation that is necessary to reduce carbon emissions, even though it's still not enough. What I don't know as much about is what companies and businesses are doing. They have more power than ever before and must use it in the right ways. But are they? I'm not sure, so to get to know more, I reached out to 3 Swedish companies to get an insight into the business sector, to see what they're doing to turn the negative trend and restore balance in nature. I wanted to see how they view the problem, what technology they see to be important to battle climate change, and finally, how they view the sustainability development in Asia. I spoke to 3 different companies, Scania, H&M and Oatly, from different industries, but all facing very similar challenges. Scania is a 130-year-old truck, bus and engine manufacturer, and their purpose as a company is to drive the shift towards a sustainable transport system by developing safe, smart and energy-efficient solutions that are better for people and the planet. H&M is another company with a great history, over 70 years in the clothing industry, and they're driven by a desire to make great design available to everyone in a sustainable way. They offer fashion, design and services that enable people to be inspired to express their own personal style, and at the same time making it easier to live in a more circular way. Oatly is by far the youngest out of these 3 companies, founded in the 1990s, and they want to make it easy for people to turn what they eat and drink into personal moments of healthy joy, without recklessly taxing the planet's resources in the process. So now let's hear what they have to say. In your words, what is the challenge you're facing?
Well, sustainability is a much broader topic than just climate change, but climate change is perhaps the most urgent and critical issue that we are facing.
We're using the resources from the earth in an unsustainable way. We're basically taking so much from it and not giving back.
Climate change is something that there's a natural component to it, there's a human-driven component to it, but what it really means is changes in all of the weather patterns around the world that's influenced by how we go about our daily lives, how we use energy, how we treat natural landscapes and things like that.
I think that the biggest sustainability issue that is relevant to the automotive industry is climate change, because transportation in general contributes almost a quarter of global CO2 emissions, which is why we have a very important role to play in this most critical of sustainability issues.
And do you believe that it's possible to turn the problem around?
Absolutely, or I wouldn't be working in this job, for sure.
It definitely is both technologically possible and socially possible.
Yes, of course, we have to. That's the only way forward.
How important is plant-based milks to drive the shift towards a sustainable dairy industry?
I think it's super important. I mean, if we've in different countries, plant-based milks are only anywhere between, like, I can't remember which is the highest country, but it's only around the sort of 10 to 15% range. And so you still have in most countries, the majority of milk consumption is still regular livestock, dairy milk. So we have such a long way to go. And to me, the more that we can shift that system and make it a more diverse system and have, a higher proportion of that total be plant-based milks, the better we are.
The future of transportation is zero emissions, and we need to create solutions that can allow us to consume the transportation we need, the goods transports we need, the public transport we need, and the personal transport we need, without creating these negative impacts like pollution, CO2 emissions that lead to climate change.
If you have to kind of predict the one fabric that's gonna take H&M into sustainable fashion, what is that fabric? Is there a magic fabric that's gonna solve problems?
We need a lot of different solutions, but I would say strategically, cotton is still our biggest fabric, and here I would really say recycled cotton.
Carbon labeling, or sometimes they're called climate declarations. Those can be either on food products or on websites. So we have done that footprinting for all of our European products, 119 products. Just like people have gotten used to looking at calories or looking at amount of sugar or amount of sodium, people can start to get used to looking at carbon footprint, and they can compare that with other products.
We need to deliver zero emissions transportation. Today, the technology that can achieve that is electrification of transportation.
We have something called Conscious Exclusive, which we launch twice per year. And in here, we have different type of material innovation that we've never tried before. So it's quite small scale, so we can bring it to big scale later. And one pair of sunglasses we have in this is actually made from carbon dioxide from the air. So we managed to capture carbon dioxide and therefore reverse pollution, so to say, into a pair of sunglasses. Those type of solutions is really what we need. Today, those are not in big scale, but we are really trying to push it forward.
Yeah, sounds really interesting. I would really like to try those.
So Sweden has focused on environmental issues for quite a long time, I would say. Hong Kong has been a little bit slower to pick these issues up and to see them as a very integral part to their general government policy. Things are changing right now. Hong Kong also has a certain responsibility to follow, for example, the announcement that was made in China last month about achieving carbon neutrality by 2060.
I would say that, the challenges we face in Sweden are very similar to the things that's happening in Hong Kong, such as how do we consume in a good way, how do we make sure that we have clothes that last for a long time, that can be taken care of, and really be sustainable.
Specific to Oatly and sort of plant-based milks, my understanding is that, there hadn't been as much discussion and talk about food sustainability in the past 10 or 15 years as there has been, particularly in Europe and somewhat in the US, but that's really growing really quickly right now. So it's almost like just in the last few years, people, particularly in China, started hearing more about plant-based milk alternatives, and that it's just really growing so fast, the interest and the uptake. And because there are so many people, there's such a high population in Asia, that there's really a big opportunity.
The real issue here is really that it has to happen. China needs to do this, otherwise they would have huge issues as well. So I believe that China will clean up their CO2 emissions as well. The big challenge for the whole planet is that even though 2060 sounds like an ambitious target, is a little bit too late, and they have not yet peaked their emission yet. So they are planning to peak their emissions in 2030, I believe, which is consistent with what we're seeing globally. CO2 emissions are still growing every year, even in pandemic. In this pandemic year, CO2 emissions are growing, and in order to actually stay within acceptable levels of climate change, we need to come to carbon neutrality faster than the current ambitions show.
Maturity is probably the right word. Like when I think about Sweden and Germany and the UK, definitely just among customers, people have a greater awareness of environmental impacts of their food, climate change generally, and things like that. People, I think, have just, probably because the governments have been more proactive in talking about the issue and working on the issue, that people seem a bit more mature in their understanding. And then when people are more mature in their understanding, then they seek out, those products. And then also the policy frameworks and the laws and the regulations are a bit more mature. They're a bit further along.
So clearly these companies know what they're doing. They have a clear understanding of what the problem is, why it's happening, and how to prevent it. They are working to bring forth technological solutions that will help to battle climate change. Oatly has a very innovative process to make high quality oat milk, and they're also encouraging the food industry to show carbon footprint on their products. This will make it a lot easier for consumers to make better choices for the environment. H&M is working hard to find the best material for sustainable clothing. They believe that recycled cotton is going to be one of those important ones. They're also doing smaller scale innovative projects, such as capturing carbon dioxide from the air to make products like sunglasses, which we already heard about. Scania is here and now working with available solutions such as biofuels, and they're also partnering up with other companies to drive towards electrified transport. And they believe that electrification is essential to make a sustainable transport system. All three know what's happening in Asia. It's a very not as mature market as in other parts of the world in terms of sustainability, but they believe that sustainable development will also happen here. And that it needs to happen, because Asia is a very large emitter of carbon dioxide. So for the world to cope with climate change, everyone needs to change and adapt. So clearly there's a lot to learn from Swedish companies for other companies to look at. Because there's no other way. Every company needs to incorporate sustainability into everything they're doing and make it essential to their business. Because it needs to be done. There's no other way and there's no other planet. As a final question, I asked these 3 companies if they believe that they're part of the solution to climate change. Now let's hear what they say.
We are part of the problem, but we want to be part of the solution, and we're working very hard to be that.
It's really our whole business model, and it's something that we sort of see as that's the value that we bring to people, is not just the value of oat milk, but also the value of better environmental performance, lower climate impact. So absolutely, that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
We are also part of the solution. We are the ones that will continue to deliver all these vehicles around the world. So we need to focus on delivering clean vehicles that will support the global ambitions of driving towards a climate neutral world.
Well, you don't see that I'm smiling under the mask, but I think you all understand why I was impressed and why I'm really curious to ask some questions to Filip and also to some local young people who might have a little bit different perspective. So I would like to welcome you all up on stage. Filip, Kamakshi, and Zoe. How are you doing?
Great, thank you for being here and for you being here as well. It's really great time together, I hope.
I think we are the ones that will say thank you in the end, actually, but good. Well, first of all, I think that everyone is quite curious on who you are. Could you maybe introduce yourself in 30 seconds? If we start with you, since the film was yours.
Okay, so yeah, my name is Filip Zachrisson. I've been living in Hong Kong for the last 5 years and really interested about sustainability, and I really started living here in Hong Kong and kind of accumulated into this project. And now we're moving back to Sweden again, but I think I'm going to have a lot of takeaways that I'll be taking back to Sweden as well.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Kamakshi Bhavnani. I've been living in Hong Kong for the past 10 years. I'm also really interested in sustainability, particularly marine conservation. A couple of months ago, I founded an organization called the Youth Ocean Alliance, which aims to get young people to work on marine conservation. I will also be moving away this summer to Canada, but it's going to be a really exciting time for me because I think I've learned a lot from Hong Kong, and I'm looking to see what I can learn in new places now.
Sounds good.
Hi everyone, I'm Zoe, and I grew up here in Hong Kong, and unlike them, I will be staying in Hong Kong after this year, and I'm more interested in the life sciences and medicine, so yeah, nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Well, we're going to start talking a little bit about sustainability since Filip's film was focused on sustainability, so we have that as our first topic. And the first question, what does sustainability actually mean to you? That's a very big question. We start with you, Filip.
Yeah. So what comes to mind first and foremost is to maintain the health of the planet long term. That's really at least what I think about straight away. And also to have the opportunity for future generations to continue to be able to access their needs and do so in ways that are good and live in a planet that is working. But then what also comes to mind is economic and social development and continuing that, because we also need that in this world. So at the core of this question, we need to ask ourselves, how do we satisfy our economic needs and social needs, by at the same time maintaining and improving our environmental health? And I think that over the last decades or so, we've really prioritized economic development, which has landed us in this situation we're facing today with global warming and climate change happening. But I think from what I saw in my film and talking to these companies, I think that it's clear that these two questions and these two aspects can go hand in hand together, and that's happening more and more, I believe. So that's sustainability for me.
Cool. We'd go with Zoe this time.
Okay, I think sustainability is like leaving the world the same or like better than we enter it. And yeah, I also agree that we have to balance it with economics and the social change. And I think probably the key is gonna be like technology, because with technology we can like sort of revert the changes that we made and also like improve how we do things better in the future.
Kamakshi?
I think I agree both with Philip and Zoe, but my take on sustainability would be, I think on an individual level, I think I would see sustainability as a lifestyle that kind of stems from a passion, at least for me, like what drives me to live a sustainable life and to kind of encourage other people to do the same would be my love for the environment. So I think sustainability is finding a way to sort of build harmony and a connection between all the different aspects that we have on the earth. So like people as well as the environment, and like Philip said, you know, social and economic factors would also play in there. But I think at the core of it, to me, sustainability is simply a lifestyle in the way that we should all kind of encourage ourselves to live by.
But it's quite interesting that we hear that no matter who you ask this question to, you will get quite an individual answer, because we do all have our own perspective of what sustainability is and where the limit goes. Kamakshi, if we continue, like, is it essential to be sustainable for a company, would you say?
I think for a company, it would be essential to be sustainable, especially if you know, now in times like COVID, where you can see that there's a lot of fragility in society. I think things are more fragile than we used to think they are, and we don't really know what the future holds. It's very uncertain. So I think sustainability is something that is grounding, considering that climate change is going to be a problem that we know we're going to face in the coming years. And so I think for companies, being sustainable is essential, because it's kind of guaranteeing that you're doing your part to contribute to the ways that, obviously I don't think every company would be able to be 100% sustainable, but because we are all having an impact, I think trying to do our bit to take that back in some way is really important. So I think, yes, it is essential.
Yeah, I would agree there as well. And I also think that it's essential to be sustainable, because otherwise you're not going to have any customers in the future.
Right? And I think especially your generation, it's even more important to actually have it as part of your DNA. Philip, you've been talking to several companies and you did interviews with them. Do you believe what they say? Or is this an adult thing to talk?
Yeah, great question. But yes, in general, I do believe all companies that talk about it in trustworthy and meaningful ways and are actually taking action. On the other hand, I think it's pretty clear to consumers, those companies that are not doing that. And especially to me, just in the last few years, becoming more aware of this issue and changing my ways to be sustainable, I do see more and more companies doing that as well. And then I also think it depends a little bit on the industries, and for so on, certain industries might need to change more. What comes to mind is maybe like the fossil fuel industry. They're such an integral part of the problem, right? And maybe need to change more and find other solutions. But yes, I would say that they do take sustainability seriously, but can also continue to raise their goals all the time.
They can be better. Everyone can be better all the time. Yes, good. What kind of companies do you believe in? Can you say like industries or types of companies that you believe in more than others? Yeah,
good question again. More than just the companies that are doing good things, I think it's important to look at the industries and the bigger picture of things. So as I said, certain industries have more things to do, and so they need more change, which might take longer time periods and more effort. And that's also where I think startups have an important role to play, because they can really have sustainability at the beginning and have it like integrated with their company and be on the path already. while the bigger companies might need some more time to change, and it might be a little bit, not as easy. Not saying at all that it's not possible. As I saw with Scania and H&M, these are two long-lasting companies, and they seem to be changing. So it really needs to happen across all different companies, small, medium, bigger companies. Everyone needs to change.
But do you have any feeling of what kind of companies you feel have the most improvement to do, or that they just lack their communication, so you don't get that information?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, fossil fuel industry, I think that's a big one. Then dairy industry, the meat production industry, maybe fishing industry as well. I think they really need to recognize that they're part of the problem here, and instead of kind of repelling change, instead embrace that change and work towards other solutions. Because that's still going to be profitable and a really good way of doing business, but just about being able to change, being able to adapt.
Do you have any view on companies that you believe in, or that you think are doing a good or amazing good job?
I was thinking that the textile industry is like trying to do a good job, because like H&M and things like that, they are trying to get more sustainable materials so because they actually contribute quite a lot to the pollution scene. So it's great to see them improve.
Well, we are actually in the best place in Hong Kong for this, being at the mills, since there are a lot of companies or startups here doing different initiatives within sustainability. So if you haven't been around here, I can highly recommend to take a little tour afterwards. Filip, I focus on you a little bit more on this segment since we have the connection to the film. If you would be responsible in a company, what would your priorities be based on what you've seen and heard and think?
Yes. I think that I would make our purpose as a company very clear and align that purpose through the whole organization, because I think working for a purpose brings more motivation and brings more meaningful work. And I think that motivation in all our employees would manage us to be leaders in what we're doing and have that strong sustainability focus. And I also read a book about companies and sustainability by Henrik Henriksson, a managing director of Scania before and now H2 Green Steel, and also Elaine Grunewald from Ericsson. And they laid out kind of a 3-step process for a company to be sustainable. And they said that you got to start with changing your company, then move on to changing your industry, and then change the world. So I would follow that path. I would identify myself on those 3 sections, and then I'd work towards the next one, and eventually, hopefully, be world leaders in what we're doing. Yeah,
that's good. We all read a lot about sustainability and related questions. Kamakshi, what would you say? How do you value information you read? What do you trust? Do you think it's a lot of greenwashing? Do you think it's a lot of fake news within this segment? Or, how do you take information?
I think right now, because of the social world that we have, everything has to be taken with a grain of salt. I study media studies, which is basically where we study the means through which any information is presented to us on the internet. And I think my favorite part of that subject is the theories that we learn. And one that I really hold on to is called the hypodermic needle theory. And the concept with that is that as an audience, we've grown to become more passive to the things that we read, meaning we don't think about where they're coming from or what they mean. And so as we're passive audiences, companies and industries can put their information online, and we will kind of absorb it as though it's a needle and we're being injected with the information. So I think that I do like to believe the information that we read online, because a lot of the time, it's positive news about sustainability. But I think that as long as you are critical when you're reading things, thinking about not just what the news is, but where it's coming from, then I do think that you should trust information that is out there, and it's important to be aware because I think another fundamental cause of this lack of action that we have for sustainability is because there's a lack of awareness in certain places. And so I think it is important to make sure that you're, reading and making yourself aware of the issues that are happening and also why they're happening. I think it is good to look at things critically because right now there's so many things going on that you don't really know what's true and what's not.
Would you say that you double check information yourself when you find something that is interesting? Do you take it that far?
I think so. It depends on what it is for me personally. If I take a deep interest into it, a lot of the time if it's related to sustainability or the environment, then it is relatively easier to double check it because I think you can just kind of search up what you're looking to find. And if you, obviously it's pretty straightforward. I think most people would know if you can find it in 3 places and it's reliable. But I think, yes, you should double check it. And I tried to do that myself. I think another thing that is very simple with climate change and sustainability is that you don't always have to turn to the internet to educate yourself. I think sometimes we get really, really caught up in our lives that it's really easy to miss the signs that we can see in our everyday life. So I think it's important sometimes to just kind of take a step back and look at your life, and then you'll start to notice where, like, areas where you can identify, I guess, like signs of climate change in your country or your life. And I think those also are forms of information that we often dismiss but should recognize more, I think.
Smart answer. How would you say that, what do you think about the future? What will the world look like in, let's say, 50 years? Will we change? Will this continue? It's a very big question. Zoe?
I'm not very sure, but I actually think that it's gonna be more difficult to coordinate global thing because like right now as we look at the politics, it's getting more and more like polarized, and like globalization, I'm not sure where that will lead. So maybe there will be more localized efforts to try to like change, like I heard the phrase called changing your corner of the world, so I think that might be what the future holds.
Any more opinions here?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say I'm an optimist.
That's good.
About the future. And I think it's important saying I'm an optimist, I think it's important for everyone to be optimists and be excited about the future and go into it with energy and motivation, because I think that brings out the best in people.
True.
And based on that, we are motivated and we're positive. I think that we're going to have reached a point in 50 years where we are living somewhat in harmony with nature. And I was thinking earlier, a bit like old enemies becoming friends again, maybe. So we would be the enemies to nature and then we'd be friends. Of course, it's not that simple, right? It's more than that, but I think at least that's where we're going towards. And with that, I would like to say 3 key things I would see in that future. And it'd be that, first of all, how we eat would change. So we probably have more plant-based, which we're already seeing now, but even more. Secondly, I think we'd use data more. So I'll bring up an example of that as well. And then we'll also use partnerships, between competitors. Partnerships that weren't that normal before are going to be important. And an example of this is, I was thinking of the transportation system, so how we use data and partnerships. In the future, I think that the transportation is going to be completely changed, so we're going to use data to make it much more efficient. We can connect all the vehicles, and I heard a lot about this talking to Scania as well, connecting vehicles and make our transport system safer and more efficient. So I think that's going to be shown throughout our entire society more and more. So yeah, I have a positive view about the future.
That's good. I think more people need that. I was just worried when you looked at me and you said enemies. That was the only thing I reacted on. Kamakshi, what do you think about the future?
I think I agree with Philip that as young people and as environmentalists, I think it's very difficult to act on sustainability if you don't have a little bit of optimism in you, because the hope that we can change the situation that we're in right now is what would kind of drive action. So I think I would like to be an optimist as well and say that I do see us having overcome climate change. And I think one of the most exciting things and one of the things that drives me the most to act would be, like Filip said, kind of turning nature that sort of turned into an enemy of ours for a couple of years into a friend. I think there's the concept of symbiosis is what I see the future to be, where everything just sort of flows together, and it's a kind of codependent and mutually beneficial relationship between us as people and the natural world. So I think that's what I would like to see in the future.
Good. If we go over to the area of communication, do you think, I mean, we still connected to sustainability, but do you think the companies are good at telling the stories? Do you hear what they say about sustainability, or do you think that they do a lot more initiatives than they actually tell?
Right, yeah, so for those of you who was here for the Spotify one, just before, they talked about communication a lot as well, and they mentioned the 3 C's. So clear, compelling, and consistent. So I think that's very relevant to communication that we're talking about as well. And yes, I would say that companies are becoming better and better at communicating about their sustainability. And especially for the youth, I think it's important to have that reporting be compelling. So we actually end up reading it, so it doesn't just lay on some website somewhere. But we actually listen to it and we understand it. And a good example of that was Oatly sustainability report that I came across. You scroll through it, hundreds of pages, and it's numbers and it's colorful and all that makes it really nice to read as well. So that's the compelling part. Then making it clear, simple, easy to understand. And I heard an analogy about how Richard Branson describes climate change and global warming, and he said, think about it as a blanket covering the world. And for every year we're adding more emissions, we're making the blanket thicker. So that's an easy way to understand these issues. So that's a clear part, making it very clear. And then, if I may, I would like to add a 4th C to this, which would be make it customer orientated or make it targeted to the customer. And that would be, making it relevant to your audience. So a final example here, Nike's sustainability report. They related all their data to sport-related things. So all their customers who most likely like sport can read about this and be very inspired and find it meaningful because it's about sport. And I think that can be...
Do you think they should communicate differently to reach you rather than that they write it for me? Do you think there is a difference between you and me?
I think so. That's the customer-oriented,
yes.
Maybe...
But do you think they need to do it in 2 ways?
That could be an option. I mean, it would be kind of weird to have a click here for adults, click here for youth.
Yes.
But maybe having a balance of that, right? And that's about the customer orientation, make it more, accessible for youth, because that's probably more important right now. Yeah.
Zoe?
I think, I would say so.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's nothing.
Nothing
much
no? Do you have anything, Kamakshi? Do you think they are good at communicating, or do you think that it's more like the vision that they try to communicate?
I think in the past couple of months, I've been more surprised by the amount of a sustainable vision that's kind of integrated in businesses than I would have known in the past. So I think in the past few years, it's becoming more and more evident. But I think there needs to be more of it. Like my dad's company works on insurance, but I think he really advocates for the work that they do on sustainability because, he's really keen on the environment. That's kind of where I got my love for the environment, is from my dad. But I think that I really wouldn't know or be able to find out that unless he told me. So I think that it's integrated into the kind of fundamental ways that businesses are structured nowadays. But I think there's slightly less like a lack of awareness about these kind of things. And I think that people also don't realize that there's an appeal to being sustainable. I think a lot of companies underestimate the amount of I guess, need that people would have as consumers to, work with or purchase from sustainable companies. And I think the more that is broadcasted to the people that are using their products, the better it would be for them. It's not just something that, a couple of environmentalists are interested in. I think that now more and more the general public is also becoming interested in, moving towards sustainability, because that sort of is the future. And I think people are starting to see that now.
Cool. If we continue talking about communication, how do you think that communication will be in the future? Will we use emails? Will we use fax again? Will we use social media? What do you say, Zoe? What is your prediction of communication?
I think it's probably going to be more efficient and shorter and also more visual, so like more punchlines and stuff, because our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter, and we're more like tuned to visual things that stimulate our brains. And I feel like that's going to be the trend to keep becoming even more stimulating as more things fight for attention. So yeah.
But if I want to communicate with you, which channel do I reach you in?
I would say, like, I still use email, I guess.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a bit of an issue there.
We definitely had an issue.
Yeah.
I was going to send some information to these young people, and then I get a WhatsApp from Philip where he says, could you please send over the information? And I said, yes, I have. And then it was like, oh, it's an email. Then the second time this happens again. It's exactly the same story. Can you send it? I have sent it. And then it's there. So, of course, this might mean that I'm old. I don't learn that you do not read emails as fast as you read your WhatsApp or some other channel.
I think that was a bit on me as well, maybe.
Yeah, could be so.
Listening to email. But I think that's the direction it's going towards, the easier. The easier, the better.
The fast and easy way. But I think this is quite important, because communication nowadays is not really where I want to communicate. It is where my target audience is. And if I want to reach you guys, it's actually up to me to listen to you where you say in which channel you want the information, and not me continuing sending emails to you, because that will not work in the long run.
Yeah, you learned after a while though.
You say it 3 times at least, then you learn something. So you might get one more. Which channels are you guys using today?
I think everything. I think in terms of social media, I'm pretty sure most of us are using everything. I do think that that's not necessarily a good thing. I kind of like, if I add on a little bit of an answer to the previous question, if you ask me, I've always really, really wanted to use a pager that they used to have ages ago, where you can't really send a bunch of, like, you can't write a lot, and I don't think you can reply. So I really want to try using a pager, because I think that because people around me use social media, I feel the need to do it, or I feel more inclined to use it to communicate with the people around me and feel closer to them. But if it was up to me, I don't think I would necessarily want it, because it's very easy for it to become all-consuming. But unfortunately, I think in some ways to stay in touch with the people around you, especially now with COVID, where we're kind of like physically further away from everybody than we have been ever in the past. We're more connected because of social media, but I think that sometimes it can be overwhelming, and I think it's important as individuals to recognize when it's becoming too much and to kind of stop and take a step back. Maybe get a pager, try use it for a couple of weeks. But I think that, yeah, I do use most social media, but
are you on
not
Facebook? Are you on Facebook, or is Facebook dead?
Dead.
It's dead.
Yeah, it's kind of.
Yeah, that's kind of what I expected, and still, my generation continue using Facebook. So I mean,
But maybe it's a good platform for adults then.
probably
Yeah.
yes. We can leave it at that. At least we know that we should not be there. Communication-wise, I mean, the channels are of course important, because it's no use that I communicate with you guys if I use the wrong platforms. But also one important thing is language. I mean, since language is kind of developing with each generation, Do you have any words that you do not think I understand?
MIA.
MIA.
TMI.
TMI.
HRU.
That sounds like a university. or something.
WYD.
Yeah, this is a quite clear example. You should probably say what they mean.
How are you? What are you doing? Too much information there.
Missing in action.
Yeah. Very basic, but still, they kind of passed me. And that is communication in two ways. I mean, if you want to communicate to me and want me to understand, that is as important as me trying to reach you guys and not using the wrong language. So channels are important and the language is important. We have to realize that we are different and we use communication in different ways. That's good. I would kind of want you to do a list with words so that I can develop my own language and communicate more correctly in the future.
No problem.
Thank you. Okay, next segment that we want to talk a little bit about is the day you come out and going to search for a job. When you think about the future and you're going to work for a company, what do you think is the most important thing? Is it money? Is it vacation? Is it what kind of values the company, what they stand for? What is important? Philip?
Yeah, I mean, I think as people that are aware of these, young people that are aware in general, we're going to want to align our values with the companies. So I would say the value one, and having a focus on sustainability for anyone is probably going to lead to them wanting to work for someone who also has that. So that's kind of connecting back to what I said earlier with the purpose. If you have a strong purpose, then you'll probably also get people who want to work for you who also have that strong want to fulfill their meaning and purpose and work for something more than just money, for example.
What is
I
your
would
take?
say strong mentorship and
Strong mentorship.
yeah, because I feel like in the job circle, it's very difficult to understand how you could contribute a lot to an industry. So I feel like if you're following a mentor who is very inspiring, that would be quite helpful.
This is actually one of the dreams I have for the Chamber, is to develop a reverse mentorship program so that we actually can learn from you guys. So maybe you and I should team up here and we can do an exchange. What would you say, Kamakshi?
I would say a vision. Like if I was to work for a company, I would want to see a strong vision. I'm not sure right now what exactly I would want that vision to be because I don't know exactly what it is I would want to do in the future, but I think that for leaders, the ability to kind of visualize the change that you're trying to create is something that's super important because once you kind of see it, I think I kind of believe in the concept that if you see it enough for yourself, then you're subconsciously going to make an effort to turn that vision into a reality. So I think if I was looking to work for a company, something that would be important to me would be a very clear vision that is being driven by a leader who really, really believes in it and kind of embodies it.
I think it's interesting that neither of you mentioned money. So it seems like other things are more important than money. Am I correct?
Yeah.
It's kind of a little bit important.
Money.
You still want them?
Still want a bit of money as well.
Yes. Okay. Do you guys have a dream employer? Is there a company that you like, you think that they do so much good stuff, so you would love to work there one day?
Not really. I haven't decided yet, and I might be going to pursue academia. So.
Yeah, I do actually. I've read a lot about an organization called Norrsken Foundation, a Swedish organization that many of you might have heard of before. And what they do is that you do impact investing into impact entrepreneurs. So impact investing is only investing in people and ideas that are doing something that is good for the planet or for people or for global issues. So yeah, for me, be able to start an own company and be supported by them, have the co-working space that they have around the world in Stockholm and Rwanda in Africa, working somewhere there. That would be a dream, and that might change, of course, in the future. But right now, that's the target.
Kamakshi?
I think for me, I don't necessarily know a particular company that I could name, but I love the ocean. So for me, any company that would be willing to put me in the water with like some sort of whales and dolphins would be pretty good.
That would work. So
yeah,
if anyone have any ideas, they can just connect with you later.
I think so.
Yes. Some of you listened to the Spotify seminar previously, and since they launched their work from anywhere concept, I mean the new normal where you're not in an office, but you work from home. Is this something that you could visualize yourself to work, from home, or do you feel like, you one day want to have colleagues and sit in an office? Is that important?
Yeah, we have been online for this last, is it 1.5 years, about something like that, and many of you working as well have been online. And at least drawing from my experience, and I've heard that many people saying this as well, it's that coming back to school was so nice, and being able to see everyone, you had your teachers again, and you felt like you learned more as well, suddenly. So basing my opinion on that, it would be having somewhere to go, having some people to talk to, and being more creative. Saying that though, it's like the normal rows of desks and stuff like that in an office, that seems kind of boring to me. So having kind of more creative and open spaces, that would be kind of modern offices. And I think if any of you have seen Google's offices, they're very colorful, very creative, and it feels like you just want to go in there and then do some work, and you can sit anywhere, and then if you want to go there, you be quiet and then talk there. Like that kind of feeling would be...
The thing that are more appealing as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually read a study from a company that checked that they did recruitment, and then they had art in the background of the reception, and they compared the two groups, and it was like 90% who wanted to work for the company with art in the background. So, I mean, I do understand that there is some psychology behind that, actually. I have to ask you, Greta Thunberg, you all know Greta, the Swedish environment. Is she doing a good job? Or do you think, Kamakshi, what do you say? Do you think that she's, a symbol for something, or would you do something different?
I would say that she's done an amazing job at getting everybody talking about climate change. I think people, I think myself have seen people who I never thought would be talking about climate change because of her. So I think that she kind of ruffled some feathers and got the right people talking about it. It is the timing of, her peak was a little bit unfortunate because right after that, COVID kind of exploded on the world, and the focus shifted on health a lot. And so climate change is now kind of on the back burner again. But I do think that she got a lot of people talking. Personally, if I was to do what she did, I would change one thing about it. What I would change is that I think she went to people in positions of power, and I think, like Philip's mentioned before, they have the power to change more than most people do, and so she went to the right people. But I think if it was me, I would have a clear ask. I would tell them what it is that I think they could do to create the change that we need. Because I think she's very well educated and she knows a lot about the environment. So if there was one thing that I would change about what she did, it would be to not ask for change, like generally, but have specific ways in which they can implement change, which I think would be easier to, also I think for people listening to Greta Thunberg or kind of idolizing her, it would be good for them to see whether or not, these people in positions of power are actually following through on the change that we're asking for, because it would be kind of clear based off of the things that we know would help resolve sustainability and climate change issues.
Cool. You have seen that we have some photos in the background that we've had one photo per session that we were part of this discussion. And these are actually 3 photos that come through a new member of ours. And this is a photographer called Christian Schmidt. And all his photos are connected to sustainability, human rights, etc. So there is a lot of symbolic value in them. Do these photos talk to you? Do you see something in them?
Yes, we're looking at this whale here, the first one. I think that kind of embodies harmony with nature. It's like people and whale, like very unconventional partnerships, which we talked about, coming together under the ocean, and it's like, yeah, maybe this is how it is in 50 years, right? The balance, and they've become friends again.
Good, and that was actually very close to the story behind it as well. What do you guys think?
I really like the second one. I think they're looking at each other. It's so cool. Like before the event, I was looking at the photo and I was like, oh, is it photoshopped? But then no, apparently not. So I think it's really cool that the person, like the child and the animal, could be in such proximity and yeah, harmony.
Yeah, this is actually, it's a photo from a rescue center for cheetahs. So this little girl is actually raised on this farm, so it is an authentic photo actually. So, but there is a, but we saw that these photos, this is very much sustainability in one sense. This is very much about communication and trust. And the last one is more about the dreams and the future. And if you see that the future is yours, and all the possibilities that you do have, we thought that it was kind of a symbolic value with the eagle.
I would like to say though that even though these two might have difficult time to communicate, I feel that we have a better communication style.
Thank you, Philip.
Yeah.
You tried to save it there in the end. That's good. I would like to ask you one last question before we have to wrap this up. If you would give me and the audience one recommendation on how I should think differently or what I should focus on, what would that be? Should we start with Zoe?
Okay, I would say maybe, I think maybe try to think about how we can form habits based on things. Because like one problem that I identify is that we always stop at awareness. So we're like, oh, the world is like so bad right now and then so problematic and then like everything is burning up and then things like that. But then we stop there. So we're like, oh, it's bad. But then like we have to sort of recognize that every small step actually matters. And so yeah, maybe think about how to build habits and how maybe like every week have a day where you don't eat meat or something, like try to build habits.
Good. Kamakshi?
I would say that, especially right now, when you look at the SDGs, because they cover almost every single problem that comes to mind, it can feel really overwhelming when you look at it as an individual, because it feels like any action you take would be negligible compared to the large, massive problems that we have in the world right now. And I think that sometimes that can be really discouraging. But I think you would be surprised how much the smallest little actions make a big difference. So my biggest advice would be to start. You know, the one little change that you make to your life will show you that it's not that difficult to start implementing change. And then when you make a little change, then you'll make something bigger and something bigger. And I think another thing that I would also recommend as one of those small changes that you can make, which Dr. David Baker mentioned to me a few months ago, which is about, he talked about the concept of voting with your wallet. So when you're buying from companies, I think that, you know, Philip's film was a really good example of the kind of concept of this. When you're buying from companies, look into their sustainability background, because by purchasing from unsustainable companies, I think it's submitting to the culture or saying that it's okay to kind of continue with unsustainable you know, production and means to do things. And so I think when you're purchasing things, even though you might be paying a little bit extra, you're voting with your wallet for sustainability. And I think that's a small change that we can all try to make in our lives.
Cool. And Philip?
Yeah, these are two great suggestions already. But I would say also go away and second think, have another think, reflect again. And then if you're a person in a bit of power, you can change an organization. Or if you're an individual, listen to Kamakshi and Zoe, build habits, vote with your wallet, and then, yeah, think again, and there will always be something you can do to change. And yeah, like we have said, even the smallest thing matter, and they'll continue to build up, and then in 50 years we'll have this glorified world we've been talking about today. So that's where we're going for.
Amazing. amazing. Can you imagine that these 3 young people are 16 years old? I have to say that from my perspective, when I was 16, I was not really on this level. I'm totally impressed by all of you, and the day you want a job, you should come to me first to see, because I think that you have a bright future, all 3 of you. Thank you so much for joining this hybrid event, and thanks for sharing your view on things. And we should give them a big applause. And you will just get a little courtesy from the Swedish consulate, and then some flowers, a small token of appreciation for this effort. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very, very good.